It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Meg Schmieder. I hope I'm saying that right, Meg, is our primary Rotary liaison with ShelterBox Canada. And of course, ShelterBox Canada is the recipient of much of the output of this conference. She's going to talk to us about how the changing disasters of climate change are really creating new challenges and impacting the humanitarian response. Meg has an undergraduate degree in public affairs and policy management, specializing in international affairs. She's worked internationally on trade missions, and she's worked with Global Affairs Canada, and of course now with ShelterBox. Please give a warm Rotary welcome to Meg Schmieder.
Okay, everyone, hello. My name is Meg Schmieder. I'm the Community Fundraising Coordinator for ShelterBox Canada. So unfortunately, Stephanie Christensen, who is our Executive Director, who was originally slated to deliver this chat, is sick. So unfortunately, was unable to come out of the consideration for everyone's health. So the team decided to send me instead. All things considered, I'm super stoked to be here. I hope that I get to meet with you all one-on-one. I hope that everyone has a chance to go check out the shelter boxes outside, and that you all take away a little bit more, understanding a little bit more about climate change and how the pandemic really intersects with our work as humanitarians. So what I want to talk to you today about is really how the ongoing pandemic and the worsening climate is rapidly changing the landscape that we're operating in as humanitarians. We're witnessing a shift in the way that humanitarian aid is being provided, ShelterBox acting as a leader in many ways. To understand where we're going, I wanted to start off with a little bit about where we've been and where we are now. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with ShelterBox, we are an international disaster relief organization that specializes in hand-delivering emergency shelter provision and vital aid to people who are recovering after disaster. So in the past, we had a relatively standard shelter box. We had our shelter tent, of course, which is wind resistant up to 100 kilometers an hour. It can keep out rain and water up to 6 inches, and it can be both heat retentive and resistant, depending on a liner that you put in it. We've also got a lot of different other aid, including our water filtration devices. If anyone was ever in Scouts, you know that you can't go more than 3 days without water. So incredibly important to have these devices when people are recovering from disaster. We can filter out large debris in a big bag, and then it filters through to a smaller device, taking care of any bacteria or viruses, and will actually stop working if it can't do it at 100%. We've also got kitchen sets, we've got mosquito nets, we've got a whole range of things that really make up the foundations of a recovery for someone. So over the years, we started welcoming in something known as a shelter kit. So that really is something that ensures people get exactly what they need. It's very flexible, it's very customizable. It's right there on the left hand of the screen, and it really includes heavy-duty tarps, shovels for the garden if you need, ropes, tools, fixings, and things like that. But it really can be so customizable to the point I've seen corrugated iron sheeting for resilient roofing. I've seen mattresses and room dividers, really whatever it takes to ensure that people have what they need. So in the past, humanitarian aid was really delivered by people who were well-meaning, but there was really a lack of coordination, not many standards or principles, and despite well-meaning, that aid delivery was actually causing a lot more harm than good. So fast forward a couple of decades, and now all professional humanitarian organizations within the sector adhere to principles and standards, and that really ensures the safety and dignity of the people that we're servicing, as well as our aid workers. So the 4 humanitarian principles that help govern aid organizations are humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence. So humanity means that wherever there is suffering in the world, humanitarian organizations will go and they will address it, especially with a focus on those that are most vulnerable. Neutrality means that we will never take a side in any armed conflict or dispute. Impartiality means that humanitarian aid will always and must be provided solely on the basis of need, without any discrimination or any preference. And finally, independence means that the autonomy of humanitarian objectives must remain separate from any other objectives such as political, economic, or military. Additionally, there are 9 standards that you can see on the screen right here. And really what these do is they help ensure that organizations such as ShelterBox provide appropriate aid that strengthens local capacity, that we have complete mechanisms in place for local populations to use, and that we are accountable and appropriate in the way that we deliver aid. ShelterBox takes these standards very, very seriously, and every single one of our deployments adheres to them. So complementing these standards and principles, coordination is another extremely important part of our work. So this was really created a couple years back. Something known as a cluster system was developed. And what that really means is that in any humanitarian response, there is a United Nations appointed humanitarian coordinator and 11 clusters that cover all of the different areas and aspects of a holistic response. ShelterBox is a part of the logistics and the shelter clusters. So ShelterBox has been recognized as a leader in shelter provisions, and as such has been asked to lead many of these shelter clusters before. And really what these meetings do is they ensure we're sharing information, that we're not working in the same places, that we're providing similar value and aid, so to not create any kind of parity issues, and certainly that local practices and protocols are adhered to. So how is the humanitarian landscape shifting right now? What we're seeing is a lot more collaboration between long-term development agencies and more short-term rapid onset disaster relief such as ShelterBox. So historically, this really wasn't the case. There wasn't too many conversations being had between these two sectors. Now we're really seeing much more collaboration, and frankly, it makes just our responses so much more well-rounded, ensuring that once we finish our jobs that we're handing off to long-term development agencies. And this really ties into a new focus on preparedness. So there's much more of an emphasis on ensuring that local populations are prepared for foreseeable events such as disasters or conflicts, and really ensuring that there's local capacity to limit the damage and ensure that we're not continuously having to respond after the fact. There's also a very large movement to localization. So this means that we're focusing much more on ensuring that people locally have the knowledge and are empowered to lead their own responses, procuring items locally and things like that. And this is really an effort to move away from Western-led humanitarian responses and colonial-based aid systems. Cash is another really new element. It's been trialed over the last couple of years by organizations, but is quickly becoming the gold standard in disaster responses and humanitarian relief. And then finally, the big 3 C's is what we like to call it. So that is COVID, climate change, and conflict. The pandemic, the ongoing pandemic and climate change have exacerbated dramatically conflicts and disasters around the world. So there's been a push in the sector to stop calling disasters natural, which ShelterBox agrees with. We now use the term rapid onset disasters to describe things like earthquakes and tsunamis and typhoons. When a hazard hits a human habitated area, our decisions impact how that hazard impacts the community. So when we think of increasing urbanization, environmental degradation, climate change, these have had impacts on, the impacts of these events have become so much more detrimental. And we've really seen an increase in the number of people who are being displaced by rapid onset disasters every single year. And we're certainly seeing more severity and intensity and frequency of storms as well. Climate change is also impacting conflict zones and will likely increase the number of conflicts in the foreseeable future. Drought has played a major role in our responses, particularly in Ethiopia and the Lake Chad Basin and many more. It's truly, the reality is resources are going to become more scarce, and that will create the circumstances for more conflict. The UN right now projects that we will see 50 million environmentally related refugees by the end of this decade. Environmental related migration has been most acute in sub-Saharan Africa, but as well as Asia and India, where ShelterBox works. Climate change is certainly becoming a greater challenge, and with the foreseeable influx of refugees, we are concerned, to say the least, and there's a clear need to reform the system to prepare for the growing needs. So what is ShelterBox doing? So really what we are focusing on primarily is going plastics free as soon as we possibly can. And this was something that we had to do actually in our response a couple years back in Kenya when their local regulations stipulated that we were not able to use any single-use plastic. So we're now looking to do that in every single one of our responses. And we are also looking to go carbon neutral in the next 5 years, which I'm super excited to say. This is part of our plans of certainly procuring items more locally, working closely with our implementing partners who are on the ground to grow their capacity so that we don't have to fly out our response team members as frequently, and just really focusing on empowering local leaders. And the vision of traveling less and procuring items more locally was really accelerated back in March 2020 when COVID hit. And it really had just completely altered the way that we were working because we weren't able to go out to these disasters and conflicts. So of course we quickly added soap and all these kinds of different things, wash basins, masks and things like that to help prevent the transmission of COVID-19 within their communities. But we really had to develop better systems in place so that we could implement our responses with our local members and local Rotary clubs as well. A really great example of setting up these local hubs is our operational office in the Philippines. So we set up ShelterBox Operations Philippines 5 years ago. And this was as a result of the Filipino government saying that they were no longer allowing international organizations to respond to their disasters. And given that the Philippines is one of the most disaster-stricken areas in the entire world, they are on the Pacific Ring of Fire, tsunamis, typhoons, volcanoes, earthquakes, you name it, it's happened. We've responded there more times than anywhere before. So we made the decision to set up locally. We have a local warehouse in the Philippines and local staff. This photo actually is of a colleague of mine, Dami, and he's checking out our healthy stock of supply that we keep there. And really what that's allowed us to do is respond at a moment's notice as soon as a storm passes. And we work, of course, incredibly close with Rotary in many of our responses in the Philippines. We actually just wrapped up Project 2 in the Philippines. Back in December 2021, Typhoon Ray hit, and it was the strongest storm of the entire year. It was absolutely devastating, and we were able to quickly respond with the first project with the Rotary Club of Cebu. And it was such a shining example of our partnership. We were able to support 120,000 people in less than 2 months with the work of Rotary and ShelterBox together. Yes. So we will continue to adapt as the humanitarian landscape shifts, making sure that we stay agile and that we continue to get aid to those who would have otherwise not received it. And not just aid, but the specific aid that they need and the training that they need as well to best use it. So our partnership with Rotary, of course, is absolutely vital. Our history is steeped in Rotary. Our roots go all the way back. And together we are making an incredible difference around the world together. Working with Rotary for the last 2 decades has positioned us well ahead of other organizations as well in terms of responding more quickly and even accessing certain responses as well. And responding locally. So almost every one of our rapid onset disasters, ShelterBox provides the aid, we provide training, the humanitarian expertise and coordination, where Rotary clubs will provide things such as access to warehouses. They'll act as translators, get us in contact with local officials, and all of this ensures that we are able to work together and reach as many people as possible. Local Rotarians have also been gaining that expertise in disaster relief, working alongside of us and really emphasizing again that importance of empowering local leaders with that knowledge. So we also have worked recently together in our response to the war in Ukraine. Rotarians make our work possible through donations, but also on the ground. And that really sets us apart from other organizations. There are many other times where organizations have not been able to get into country or respond, but thanks to our partnership with Rotary, we have been able to support people in any kind of situation. So I am very, very excited to say that this district has raised over $100,000 in this Rotary Club year alone. Yes, truly, truly, truly something worth celebrating. And based on our records as well, 26 Rotary clubs will be recognized as ShelterBox heroes as well. And that just means that these are clubs that have made annual donations and dedication to disaster relief. And also, an amazing $916,000 has been raised by District 5360 since 2010. So just something really worth celebrating. I want to thank you so much for all of that. Each and every single one of you has made a difference in the lives of countless people. It's so difficult to put a number on it because when you think of the ripple effect of even just helping one family, providing one shelter box, we can't thank you enough for your dedication to ensuring that no one is left without disaster. No one's left without shelter after disaster. Thank you so much.
So as we will do with each of our speakers, there's 9 minutes allocated to questions and answers. There is a mic in the center of the aisle there. If you have any questions for Meg, feel free to approach the mic, and away we go.
Yes, there's no silly questions, so please ask away.
Thanks very much. It's an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
I think a little piece of history is rather useful because it shows how Rotary projects can grow. My understanding is that ShelterBox started as a Rotary project in England.
This is true, yes.
So somebody in England sitting in a room like this came up with this idea.
Yeah.
It grew enough that it became an independent organization, and so the partnership continues to work. But it's important for us to realize how impactful the projects that we bring up can result in these sorts of
Absolutely.
results.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very, very much for a wonderful presentation. I really, the principle of impartiality is really important, but geopolitics is real too. Like, how do you, with the other organizations, manage, because that's real, like in terms of both conflicts, political realities, in particular in developing countries. Any comments you'd have about that? Because I personally struggle with that. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's something that I've even struggled kind of coming into the humanitarian sector of really switching off that political brain, right? And our primary focus as humanitarians will always be on the people impacted by these geopolitical conflicts or disasters. So our focus will remain on them. I think that something that we have to consider as well is if we do not remain impartial, we risk ostracizing a party that may eventually get into power, and we have to coordinate with them to get our assistance in. So it's incredibly important that we remain impartial in every single situation.
Thank you very much, Meg. My name is Keith and I'm from Cochrane. I'm curious if you can give us a little update on what's happening with ShelterBox in Ukraine and Poland.
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So our update is that we are in the thick of it right now. We're providing aid. We've got 3 different projects. So our first project, we've been providing mattresses in collective centers in and around Western Ukraine. We're also providing shelter kits, so things like tarps, tools, so that people can rebuild buildings that they're having to stay in for a lack of being able to leave because humanitarian corridors aren't being respected. So those are our 2 projects within Ukraine. And then we're also looking to provide hygiene kits and things that are a little bit more easy to carry and transport with you for folks that are refugees in Moldova. And right now, we're focusing on Moldova specifically because it is the country that has taken in the most refugees per capita. So right now, about 15% of Moldova is refugees from the Ukraine. So they've done a fantastic job in coordinating the collective centers and things like that, but we've noticed that a lot of Ukrainians are also staying with host families, and that leaves them outside of a coordinated humanitarian effort. So we're looking to try to get in contact with them and see how we can serve them. So those are our 3 updates right now for the Ukraine. Yeah.
Thank you. That was truly inspiring, especially our work with Rotary and your organization. I'm wondering about the takedown. What happens when the shelters are no longer needed? Are they reused? Can they be used somewhere else? And in that vein, do most of these communities stay for many years? because the need doesn't change and it's difficult to resettle these people. So I'd be interested in the long term.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So our aid is extremely durable, and I can tell you now from looking at some of the reports, we call them protracted responses, so more long-term responses where you're saying, right, that need will continue. And we'll provide, our shelter kits, our tents and that, and we've seen over the years people, after they kind of come to the end of their lifetime, really reuse them and repurpose them for so many different things. But we also, of course, will kind of look at the situation and decide whether or not we need to provide some repairing tools or what have you. But people have been really, really creative with the way that they reuse their aid after it's come to the end of their lifespan. Yeah. Fabulous. Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Meg. You mentioned about we as a world need to step it up to help increase this humanitarian aid. So what steps are you trying to motivate the world to step it up?
Yeah, I think that, so the question that was posed was how do we really encourage people to step up for the foreseeable challenges of the future? And sorry, I didn't catch your name? Vern, nice to meet you, Vern. So really what we're doing is any kind of opportunity where there's a big disaster or war, particularly, in focus with the Ukraine, is any time that there is a focus, we try to really go along with that media cycle. So really try to bring people in and then use that as an opportunity to talk about a lot of our other responses that we're also in. So I say to people, the best way to get someone involved in international disaster relief is look internally and see how you connect to it. I always share the story of my grandmother was a refugee from Hungary in 1956, having fled, and that's what really brought me to this point. So I ask everyone here to consider, how does your ancestry or your lived experiences really connect you to disaster relief? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Henry, here from Fish Creek, Rotary.
Hi, Henry.
Hi. You use the great word. Now, what happens if you have a community, you're putting up tents, is all the other auxiliary infrastructure like medical supplies, food supplies, all that. Do you participate in building any of that, or does that other people pick that up? How does that all materialize?
Great question. Yeah, so how I was talking about that cluster system. So that really kind of goes along here. I'll bring up that I don't know if I can get it right now. No, that's the standards. So these are kind of the different clusters, right? So these are different organizations that fall along these lines. So we're experts in logistics, in shelter provision. So that's where we kind of stay in our lane. That's where we focus. And then we certainly coordinate through the United Nations humanitarian coordinator with other organizations that might be looking at food items and medical assistance as well. Is that it, folks? Alrighty. Well, thank you so much again. And if anyone has any questions today, come and find me. I'd love to chat. And yeah, awesome. Thank you, everyone, so much.
So thank you, Meg, for that very insightful look into the challenges that we as a society are facing as we respond to these many ongoing disasters. We'll stop calling them natural. Every speaker today is in their name having a ShelterBox donated, and the sponsor for Meg's talk was the Rotary Club of Calgary Fish Creek. So there we go.